In Charleston, South Carolina, hidden away in a climate-controlled archive, lies a weathered ledger bound in cracked, blood-red leather. For decades, historians dismissed it as just a merchant's record, a grim tally of human lives bought and sold. But in 1923, librarian Dorothy Hayes noticed something strange. 47 families listed in that ledger had simply vanished. No death records, no sales, no trace in census documents. Gone, as if they had never existed. The ledger hinted at a mystery that would span decades. At its center was a man named Thomas Garrett, a wealthy stranger who arrived in Charleston in 1851 with no past, no known family, and a plan that defied every expectation. Garrett's presence was quiet but commanding. A well-dressed man with a calm demeanor and sharp intelligence, he bought property and moved through Charleston's elite society without revealing his origins. But his intentions were far from ordinary. He was buying people, not for labor or profit, but for freedom. Who was Thomas Garrett, and why did he vanish families from the records? Stay tuned, because the answers begin with a single purchase that would change everything. It was a crisp November day in 1851 when Thomas Garrett first walked into Ryan's auction house on Chalmers Street. The smell of sawdust and sweat hung thick in the air. Merchants, planters, and speculators whispered among themselves as the auctioneer, Robert Chun, announced the next lot, a family of 4. William, a strong field hand of 35, his wife Mary, 29, a skilled domestic worker, and their 2 daughters, Clara, 7, and Eliza, 9. A complete family. The crowd murmured, bidding began, but Garrett remained calm, observing quietly from the back. When the bidding slowed, he raised his hand and declared, $2,000. The room went silent. It was an unusually high sum, especially for a family that could be bought for much less. Garrett, known for investing in property, was not known to buy labor. Yet here he was, paying top dollar. He completed the paperwork, requesting that the family be transported to one of his secluded properties in Colleton County, 40 miles inland. But Garrett added one unusual request, a sturdy Bible, to accompany them. The family left Charleston quietly the next morning. And then, as far as the city's records were concerned, they simply disappeared. No sales logs, no labor records, no evidence that they ever existed. Garrett's actions seemed eccentric, even baffling. But he was not done. Over the next months, he continued to purchase families, sometimes elderly couples, sometimes young mothers and children, always reuniting separated members, always ensuring their journey to safety was private and secure. By the end of his first year, Thomas Garrett had quietly changed the lives of several dozen people, all without a hint of publicity. The whisper of his deeds began to stir curiosity and suspicion among Charleston's elite. Garrett's first family was just the beginning. But how could one man protect so many lives without drawing attention? The next chapter uncovers the intricate web of his secret mission. By the spring of 1852, Thomas Garrett's presence in Charleston was well established. He was polite, wealthy, and enigmatic, a man who attended social gatherings yet revealed nothing of his past. But behind the polite smile and measured words lay a carefully orchestrated plan that stretched far beyond the city's boundaries. Garrett had begun acquiring properties in the rural counties surrounding Charleston, isolated farms, each deliberately chosen for its remoteness. One sat at the end of a winding dirt road, swallowed by dense pine forests. Another backed onto cypress swamps, the next nestled in a narrow valley between wooded hills. Each property was a sanctuary, hidden from prying eyes, a place where families could live away from the cruel calculations of society. His purchases were methodical. Families were bought at auctions, from private sellers, sometimes months apart, only to be reunited on these farms. He spared no expense, paying fair market value, sometimes even more, and arranging private transport to ensure their safety. Observers began to notice anomalies. Lawrence Fitzgerald, a seasoned slave trader, was the first to see the pattern. Garrett bought dozens of individuals over several years, yet none were hired out, sold again, or made to work in the fields as others expected. The farms, while maintained, showed minimal production. Small vegetable gardens, a few chickens, but no cotton, rice, or tobacco. It made no economic sense. Fitzgerald sent trusted observers to Garrett's properties. Patrick Hughes, a former overseer, reported strange findings. Children reciting lessons by lamplight late at night, collaborative discussions among adults, no locks on doors, and a sense of freedom unusual for the time. It was as if the people Garrett had purchased had entered a different world, a world where labor was not punishment and knowledge was encouraged. The network extended beyond the farms. Shipments of books, primers, histories, works of literature arrived regularly, often addressed to anonymous post office boxes near his properties. Even the logistics of transporting families, sometimes separated for years, were meticulously planned. Garrett's operation was vast, silent, and nearly invisible to the world that believed human lives were commodities. Yet Garrett was careful. Every purchase was documented, every bill of sale correctly filed, taxes paid, accounts managed with discipline. Nothing illegal could be found. And still, the question lingered. What was he really doing? While Charleston saw a wealthy, private businessman, the hidden farms held a secret mission, a mission of liberation and education. But someone was watching, and not all eyes would be forgiving. Charleston, 1852. The air hung heavy with tension. Rumors circulated in the market streets, whispered in the shadows of narrow alleys, and lingered in the grand parlors of the city's wealthiest families. Something was stirring, a network invisible to most, yet its presence was undeniable to those who looked closely. Sheriff Elijah Thorne had always prided himself on his instincts. A man of meticulous habits, he noticed patterns others dismissed. Garrett's recent purchases, farms in isolated locations, individuals bought yet seemingly unexploited, didn't add up. To the casual eye, Garrett was a philanthropist, perhaps eccentric. But Thorne's gut told him something darker, or perhaps bolder, was at work. Thorne began his investigation discreetly. He sent men under the guise of routine inspections, a merchant here, a surveyor there, each tasked with observing the properties without alarming Garrett. The reports trickled back slowly, almost too carefully. Families were living freely, children learning to read and write, adults tending small gardens but working no fields, engaging in discussions that seemed revolutionary. Word reached Thorne from informants among Charleston's merchants. Some had attempted to offer Garrett slaves or laborers at below-market rates, only to be refused politely, yet firmly. Garrett's finances were impeccable, taxes paid, bills of sale accurate, no evidence of wrongdoing. But the whispers persisted, growing louder among those who dealt in the harsh economy of human lives. Meanwhile, Garrett was aware that curiosity would come knocking. He had anticipated it long before anyone stepped foot near his properties. A system of codes and signals, taught to trusted members of his network, allowed him to communicate without raising suspicion. Families knew when to remain visible and when to disappear. The forests, swamps, and hills became living mazes. Only those who knew the paths could traverse them safely. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a small group of children ran messages from one farm to another. They carried letters encoded in simple cipher, notes that seemed innocent to any casual observer, but contained precise instructions for movement, education, and safety. These were the lifelines of Garrett's hidden mission, a mission that stretched far beyond Charleston's city limits. Sheriff Thorne, frustrated by dead ends, decided to visit one property himself. He arrived at dusk, the air filled with the scent of pine and swamp water. From a distance, he observed a house with no fences, no signs of forced labor. Smoke rose gently from chimneys, and laughter echoed softly across the fields. It was a scene that conflicted with everything he had expected. Was Garrett a criminal genius, or something else entirely? Thorne's questions grew as he noted the children reciting lessons by candlelight. He heard discussions among adults about freedom, history, and knowledge, ideas that were considered dangerous in certain circles of Charleston society. Yet all evidence was clean. There were no locks, no chains, nothing illegal. Garrett was playing a game that no one fully understood, and Thorne was beginning to see that brute force alone would not uncover the truth. Meanwhile, rumors of Garrett's operations began circulating among the city's elite. Some whispered about a network of freedom hidden in the forests and swamps. Others dismissed it as fanciful gossip, yet fear lingered. Charleston's merchants, traders, and officials began to question their own assumptions about wealth, power, and morality. Garrett's carefully constructed image of respectability and invisibility remained intact, even as intrigues spread like wildfire. The chapter closes with Garrett standing atop a hill overlooking one of his properties at night. Lanterns flickered below, signaling the safe movement of families to a new location. A map of Charleston, dotted with the hidden farms, lay spread before him. Every purchase, every plan, every movement had been calculated with precision. But the shadow of Sheriff Thorne loomed closer, and Garrett knew that the balance between secrecy and discovery was delicate. One wrong step, one miscommunication, and everything could unravel. Garrett's secret network grows stronger, but so does the curiosity and suspicion of Charleston's authorities. The question remains, how long can one man outwit a city built on rules he refuses to follow? The early morning fog hung thick over Charleston's outskirts. The city seemed asleep, but Garrett's world never did. Each shadow, each rustle of leaves, each distant sound of hooves or footsteps could signal an opportunity or a threat. By now, word of Garrett's network had quietly reached sympathetic allies beyond Charleston. Teachers, tradesmen, and former sailors who had seen injustice abroad. These allies moved silently, often at night, carrying letters, food, or safe passage instructions. Garrett had become the unseen conductor of a symphony no one else could hear, orchestrating freedom in a city that prided itself on control. Sheriff Thorne, meanwhile, grew restless. Months of dead ends had sharpened his suspicion, but also his admiration. He had begun to recognize patterns others ignored, subtle signals and smoke, unusual travel patterns of families, and coded letters disguised as mundane correspondence. Thorne started mapping these occurrences, noting correlations that suggested a hidden network spreading like a web through Charleston's back roads and forests. On a particularly tense night, Thorne decided to shadow a small group of children leaving a farm. The kids carried bundles, their movements precise and rehearsed. Thorne followed cautiously, ducking behind hedges and fence posts. The trail led him to an abandoned warehouse near the river, but what he found inside was not what he expected. Rows of families quietly reading, teaching, and preparing for relocation. The room buzzed with whispered lessons in literacy, mathematics, and history, knowledge forbidden in certain quarters. Garrett, sensing the sheriff's presence nearby, remained calm. His training had taught him patience. He sent one of his trusted aides, a young man named Eli, to subtly redirect Thorne without confrontation. Eli approached the sheriff, speaking with an innocent curiosity that masked his knowledge. "Morning, sir. Lost your way to the river." Thorne hesitated. There was something in Eli's eyes, a confidence, a resolve, that unnerved him. "I'm just inspecting the area," Thorne replied cautiously. "Be careful, sir," Eli said, and with a subtle gesture, signaled the families to continue their preparations quietly. By dawn, Garrett had relocated several families to safer grounds. Every movement was calculated, rehearsed, and executed with precision. The city, still asleep, remained oblivious to the growing network of freedom that operated in its shadows. Yet the balance was fragile. Thorne's suspicions were intensifying, and he began connecting dots that most people would overlook. Letters, small inconsistencies in property records, and even gossip in taverns started to form a pattern he could not ignore. He realized Garrett was no ordinary man. He was brilliant, methodical, and perhaps the only person in Charleston capable of outmaneuvering law enforcement at every turn. Meanwhile, Garrett convened a clandestine meeting in the dense woods outside the city. Lanterns swung gently from tree branches, illuminating a circle of trusted allies. Maps were spread on makeshift tables, routes for relocation plotted, and contingency plans discussed. Every member of the network knew the stakes. One mistake, one leak, and the entire operation could collapse. As the night deepened, conversations shifted from logistics to philosophy. Garrett spoke passionately about freedom, education, and human dignity. The group absorbed every word, inspired not just by the mission but by Garrett's unwavering belief in a world where knowledge could not be chained. The tension escalated as distant dogs barked, signaling potential intruders. The group froze, and Garrett signaled calm. "Stay focused. Every shadow may be a friend, every sound a lesson. But one misstep can undo months of planning." Hours passed. Families were safely moved. Messages delivered. The network grew tighter, more sophisticated, and more resilient. Yet, Garrett knew that Sheriff Thorne would not give up easily. The final confrontation, whenever it came, would test every skill, every decision, and every life within the network. The chapter closes with Garrett standing atop a ridge at dawn, surveying the hidden settlements. The fog began to lift, revealing the sprawling city below. Charleston seemed ordinary, peaceful, and untouched. Yet beneath that facade, a battle of wits, courage, and morality had already begun, and would shape the city's future in ways no one could imagine. The network is stronger than ever, but so is Sheriff Thorne's resolve. Garrett must anticipate every move, or the fragile web of freedom could unravel in a single night. The first light of dawn barely pierced the mist over Charleston. The city appeared calm, streets quiet, shops shuttered. But for Garrett, the calm was only a mask, the prelude to chaos that could erupt at any moment. He moved silently through narrow alleyways, listening to every echo, reading every subtle sign. A boot print, a discarded scrap of paper, even the way a door creaked. Each detail was a potential clue, each shadow a possible observer. In Garrett's world, nothing went unnoticed. Meanwhile, Sheriff Thorne had intensified his investigation. He had spent weeks studying patterns, interviewing witnesses, and following rumors. Each day, the puzzle pieces seemed to fit together more clearly. Thorne had begun to suspect that Garrett's network wasn't just a series of random acts. It was an organized, methodical underground system with reach far beyond Charleston. That evening, Garrett convened a covert council in an abandoned church on the outskirts of town. Lanterns hung from rafters, casting elongated shadows across the cracked wooden floor. Allies gathered in hushed tones, exchanging reports, planning the next series of relocations. Every detail had to be perfect: routes, timing, contingencies for spies or patrols. One young courier, Sarah, arrived breathless with news. A new informant had been spotted in the city's docks. His intentions were unclear, but he had asked detailed questions about movements, shipments, and even local families. Garrett knew that exposure could come from the least expected quarter. He leaned over the map, tracing possible paths. We cannot afford mistakes. One slip, one whisper, and all of this, everything we've built, could vanish overnight. The group nodded, absorbing the gravity of the moment. Each person was aware that they were not merely evading law enforcement. They were playing a dangerous game of survival, intellect, and courage. As night fell, Garrett and a small team navigated the back roads leading to the river. They carried essential supplies, letters, and instructions for families who were to be relocated before the next dawn. The tension was palpable. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bark of a dog, felt like an omen. Unexpectedly, a patrol emerged near the riverbank. The group froze. Garrett assessed the situation with lightning speed, signaling his team to blend with the shadows. The patrol passed mere feet away, unaware of the hidden figures crouched beneath overhanging branches. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless, a reminder that vigilance was their greatest ally. Back in the city, Sheriff Thorne reviewed the latest findings. Frustration gnawed at him. Despite following leads, interviewing locals, and staking out known paths, Garrett remained elusive. Yet Thorne's respect for his adversary grew. He realized that Garrett's intelligence, planning, and dedication made him almost untouchable. Meanwhile, Garrett returned to his safe house, exhausted but resolute. He knew the network's strength lay not just in numbers, but in the unwavering commitment of every individual involved. Families whispered prayers of gratitude. Children clutched books they were forbidden to read, and every quiet success fueled Garrett's determination. Late into the night, Garrett penned coded letters to distant allies. Each word carried instructions, hope, and warnings. The letters were small lifelines in a city that could easily turn against them at a single misstep. The chapter closes with Garrett standing at a window, looking over Charleston's quiet streets. The city slept, unaware of the invisible threads connecting families, allies, and freedom itself. But Garrett knew one truth. Shadows moved silently, secrets were everywhere, and the next moment could change everything. Sheriff Thorne is closing in, but Garrett's network is more resilient than ever. Every ally counts, every decision matters, and one mistake could destroy months of careful planning. By the spring of 1855, Thomas Garrett's presence in Charleston had become almost legendary, though few truly understood the man behind the mystery. Whispers floated through the taverns, the marketplaces, and the upper-class drawing rooms. Rumors of his strange habits, of families appearing whole where they had once been broken, of children reading under lamplight deep in the countryside. Yet Garrett himself remained invisible to public scrutiny, a phantom moving effortlessly between society and secrecy. It was on a humid April evening that Lawrence Fitzgerald received a note, written in the familiar, elegant hand he had come to recognize. "Mr. Fitzgerald, your diligence is noted. You may observe, but not yet intervene. There are things you are not ready to understand. Meet me at Colleton County at dusk, should you wish to see what you have only heard of." The ink was slightly smudged, as if written in haste, yet every curve of the letters betrayed deliberation. Fitzgerald felt a chill. Garrett's invitation, or was it a warning, was precise. Fitzgerald had spent months piecing together the pattern of Garrett's purchases, the peculiar freedom granted to those under his care, the unusual schedule, the hidden education, the books. And still, the man himself remained an enigma. That evening, Fitzgerald set out, his horse trudging through the narrow dirt paths flanked by towering pines. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and new growth, mingling with the faint saltiness carried from the distant coast. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a branch seemed amplified in the near darkness. He had asked his most trusted observers to remain behind, and he traveled alone, a mixture of curiosity and unease pushing him forward. As he approached Garrett's Colleton County property, the familiar layout emerged, small cabins arranged in neat clusters, gardens thriving, livestock grazing peacefully. Yet the usual quiet seemed even more profound tonight, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Then, faint lamplight flickered across the clearing. Figures moved, but not as laborers might. They were walking slowly, carrying books, whispering in hushed tones, their faces calm, focused. Children recited lessons aloud, their voices careful and precise. Fitzgerald counted at least 15 individuals, all seemingly free in movement, unguarded, unconfined. And then he saw Garrett. He was standing at the edge of the garden, a silhouette against the setting sun, watching the activity without speaking. Fitzgerald dismounted, heart hammering, and approached cautiously. "Mr. Garrett," he called softly. The figure turned, and the calm, piercing gaze Fitzgerald had come to associate with both warmth and inscrutable authority met his. "Mr. Fitzgerald," Garrett said, his voice carrying easily through the cool evening air. "I hoped you would come. Walk with me." They moved together along the gravel path that wound between the cabins, past the garden beds, past the small schoolhouse where a group of children was quietly practicing arithmetic. Garrett's movements were deliberate, unhurried, yet every step seemed to command attention, even without words. "You see," Garrett began, gesturing toward the cabins, "these people are not possessions. They are not commodities to be bought or sold. They are lives, fragile yet capable of extraordinary growth when given the chance." Fitzgerald swallowed hard. But why keep it hidden? Why the secrecy? A sudden sound, a snapping twig, the distant call of a night bird, made Fitzgerald glance toward the surrounding forest. Shadows danced between the pines, and he realized that they were not alone. From the tree-line, other figures emerged, moving silently, almost blending with the darkness. Garrett continued calmly, "I am not alone in this. Others, like you, who understand, who see the need for a different path, they assist me. They watch. They protect. Without them, none of this would be possible." Fitzgerald felt the weight of the revelation press down on him. He had assumed that Garrett acted alone, that the operations he observed were the product of a single mind. But now, he saw the network, the careful orchestration, the almost supernatural foresight. Garrett was not merely a wealthy eccentric. He was the center of a hidden movement, a silent revolution of compassion in a world structured by cruelty. Night fell completely, and the lamplight glowed warmly against the timber of the cabins. Families walked freely, children's laughter mingling with the soft rustle of the pine needles. Garrett turned to Fitzgerald. "Do you understand now?" he asked quietly. "This is not about profit. It is about mending what is broken, about planting seeds that will grow long after I am gone." Fitzgerald nodded slowly, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was witnessing. For the first time, he realized the true scale of Garrett's vision. The ledger, the careful acquisitions, the secrecy, the rural properties, all of it was part of a single purpose, executed with painstaking care and remarkable foresight. As he left the property that night, Fitzgerald knew two things. One, he could never reveal what he had seen without endangering lives. Two, Thomas Garrett was not just a man. He was a force, quietly reshaping the world one family at a time.